Time community, and welcome to the Wheel of Time Pod-Thru. I'm Teresa.
And I'm Tim.
And together we're going to walk through Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. How you doing today, Tim?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
I am suffering from allergies.
Ooh.
So I'm going to try to keep all that snorfly noises to a minimum, but just fair warning, that might happen.
Okay. Thanks for the warning. Sorry.
Before we get started, we just want to remind you that this is a reread. We assume that you have read the entire series, so
Yes.
there will be spoilers. You have been warned.
Meh, meh, meh.
So, Tim, what are we going to be doing in this episode?
Well, in today's episode, we're going to be covering chapters 3 and 4 of Robert Jordan's Eye of the World. And we're going to be getting a little more familiar with some of our main characters. We're going to be hearing about some news from outside the Two Rivers as well.
Oh, cool. All right, let's get into it. Chapter 3's title is The Peddler, and the icon is the Dragon Fang.
Ooh, Dragon Fang. Okay. So I'm going to quickly summarize what happens in chapter 3, and then we can hit some of the details after that. So
Okay,
real
cool.
quick summary. Here we go. So we start this chapter with the arrival of the peddler's wagon, and everyone in Edmonds Field is clamoring around. We're introduced to Paddon Fane, the peddler, who's been coming to the Two Rivers for as long as Rand can remember. The village wants more than just goods. They're really looking for news from the outside world. Paddon Fane starts telling the crowd about the news from outside the Two Rivers, and specifically about the war and a false dragon, and really whipping them into a frenzy. The villagers get panicky about a false dragon who can channel, which is worse than the Dark One, and the crowd starts to devolve into chaos when Tam and the rest of the village council decide to take matters into their own hands, and they spirit Paddon Fane away into the inn. Once they've kind of cleared out, the crowd disperses, and the boys are left just kind of talking about adventuring and maybe seeing a false dragon. Matt tells a story about trying to bait one of the Congers into mentioning the Dark One's name, and we get the arrival of Nynaeve, who lays into them for being fools. We are also introduced to Egwene, who's been training as the apprentice to Nynaeve. She's the apprentice Wisdom, and her hair has been braided, signifying that she's of marrying age, which freaks Rand out, and he just kind of panics, and then they have some miscommunication back and forth, like they do. They do throughout the entire story. Neither Egwene nor Rand are really good with communication. We start to see that here, and they're ready to continue arguing, but they're interrupted by the arrival of the Gleeman, which ends the chapter.
All right, thanks for the summary.
You're welcome.
So, the first thing that sticks out to me about this chapter is that the Edmondsfielders are so excited about the peddler's arrival, but not just because they want to buy stuff, but because they want to hear about news from afar. Right. And it's so hard to imagine a world where you're so isolated that news isn't readily available. I mean, these days, we've got our phones basically surgically attached to our hands. So, I mean, we have news immediately. If we have to wait till tomorrow to get news, even if we have to wait like 12 hours or 6 hours, it feels like it's old news. It's like, This is hardly even relevant anymore.
Like if it hits your Twitter feed, if it doesn't, then you don't know.
Yeah, like the idea of being so isolated that only a few people come through your village, like just like an occasional peddler or a merchant. So you're only getting news from outside your tiny little community, like weeks behind, months behind, like even sometimes a year behind what's actually going on.
Yeah.
I can't even fathom what that would be like. It's so foreign to everything that I'm accustomed to.
Right? Yeah.
It's crazy to think about.
So they're all gathering around the wagon to get the news, and this is where we meet Paddon Fane for the first time.
Dark friend alert.
The first time that we encounter Paddon Fane, I had no idea he was going to be such a big character as he became in the series.
Me neither, and I'm kind of bummed that he did, because, I mean, he was all right as a villain in the first few books. Like, he certainly wreaked havoc and whatever, but I feel like he stuck around way too long.
Yeah, he definitely feels like a level 1 big bad,
Yeah, he's a level 1 Bowser.
Yeah, absolutely. Level 1 Bowser. And, as our characters, quote unquote, level up throughout the rest of the series, it just, like, Fane just starts to feel tired and overdrawn, and like he should have died a lot earlier on than he did.
Yeah.
And it's like, I get to another section with Fane and I'm like, really, this guy again? Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, completely. So Patton Fane is really milking the crowd, and
yeah.
I just want to talk a minute about his showmanship. So he takes his time getting himself settled, allowing the crowd to grow to its peak anticipation. And the way Rand describes him is similar to how we first get introduced to Tom in the next chapter. In fact, Rand observes, he enjoyed being the center of attention, strutting around like an undersized rooster with every eye on him. It occurred to Rand that Fane might not be best pleased to find a real Gleeman in Emmons Field. I mean, he really thinks highly of himself, and he has a certain amount of derision for the Emmons Fielders. And we can talk about the differences between him and Tom when we get to the next chapter, because there are. But I just want to make a note here about their similarities.
Yeah, that's I think's pointing it out. And did you notice that as Fane talks about war, Rand thinks to himself that no one in the Two Rivers ever had anything to do with a war.
Yeah,
he's so wrong, and
he really is.
It's really funny. He has no idea about Tam Althora being a badass warrior, but we'll learn about that later.
Yeah.
But while Fane is actually gearing up to get everybody going and starting to do his pitch, we're introduced to Perrin.
Yay, Perrin!
One of my favorite characters. And so it's nice to see him show up, and we get some screen time with him for the first time. We find out that he's been given a coin, just like Rand and Matt were talking about in the last chapter. So he's been marked out by Moraine as someone special too.
Yeah, and so Perrin is the last of our main Two Rivers characters, and he completes the action-adventure starter kit.
Dun, dun, dun.
We start out with Rand as the humble hero, Matt as the trickster, and Perrin as the gentle giant.
So fill out your character sheets and start rolling your die.
Yeah, I don't really know what that means. But
That's okay. That just means that you're much cooler than I am. So the thing is that we've discussed before, Jordan starts out with these character types, and we're gonna kind of get lulled in this false sense of security at first, like, hey, yeah, with the gentle giant and the trickster and all that. But we're gonna find that they're gonna grow out of those really quickly and become something completely different.
Yeah, like we think that our characters are going to be limited to the confines of their archetypes, but they're not. Like Jordan takes them beyond that and turns it on their head and creates something unique.
Right.
That you don't necessarily expect when you first get introduced to them and you're like, oh, this is familiar. I know what this is.
Right.
So before we move on from Patton Fane and everything, Rand makes a note that it was just last year that Patton Fane had started to notice the three of them. And Rand thinks regarding them as men. But the reality is that we know now that Patton Fane had been brought to Shale Ghul and marked as the Dark One's hound. So he did make a note of the three boys, but he did so as the ones that the Dark One was looking for.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about the boys, our Two Rivers boys, our Two Rivers heroes. Let's talk about the girls from Two Rivers.
All right. So we've heard a lot about Nynaeve already, but this is her official entrance.
Dun, 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 dun.
So I'm going to say it right now. I love Nynaeve. She's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
And I can tell you exactly why that is later in the chapters that are about her. But just know she's my favorite, and I love her. And I feel like Nynaeve gets a bad rap because she's always depicted as angry. And I feel like that makes certain readers more likely to just dismiss everything she says or does, because of it. But I don't know, like, I feel like her anger, there's a reason for it. Like, it's not just out of nowhere. Like, later on, when she's dealing with her block, she has to be angry. That's the only way she can channel it all, is to whip up her anger.
Right.
But even early on, like here in this scene, her anger stems more from her disappointment in good people acting like fools. She knows that Matt is capable of better. She believes in Matt. So she lays into him to try to get him to live up to his potential. She sets really high standards for the people that she cares about to live up to. But on the flip side, she sets even higher standards for herself.
Right.
Like, no one is a harsher critic of Nynaeve than she is of herself. But she delivers. She can be difficult sometimes because she's flown off the handle. But when the chips are down, there's no one you want on your side more than Nynaeve.
I agree. Absolutely want Nynaeve on my side. So our other Two Rivers girl is Egwene Alver, the mayor's daughter and Rand's childhood sweetheart.
Yeah.
Especially in the beginning, we get this. There's this very clear indication that she and Rand were intended for each other to marry.
Yeah, definitely.
Small town kind of thing, anyway.
That's why Rand freaks out so much.
Yeah, doesn't he? He just
He's
panics,
like,
what?
"Oh
Wait,
my God,
huh?
braids,
What's going on? No, it's not the braid, not the braid. Ah,
Just because you can marry doesn't mean you should.
right? Yeah. So Rand just kind of freaks there for a bit.
Yeah. Oh, and did you notice? Here again, we see another instance of the distinction between Rand and his friends, where Rand is marked out as a man, while Matt and Perrin are still regarded as boys. Though, I mean, admittedly, this is through Egwene's perspective, and she's
Right.
completely biased.
Right. Just a little bit. It's also the first time we have one of those moments where like one of the boys thinks that the other boys are like better with women or girls as they are. Like Rand makes this little comment. He says, at the best of times, he, Rand, was never really nimble with his tongue when talking to girls around the village. Not like Perrin.
Yeah.
So all three boys have this thought going back and forth throughout the whole series. I mean, Perrin thinks Matt thinks Rand. They're all thinking about it. Yeah.
It's funny. And of course, this time it's kicked off because of all the miscommunications and misunderstandings between Rand and Egwene, which they do all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I swear, through the entire series, there's maybe one or two encounters they have that doesn't devolve into an argument.
Yeah.
Like, they can't be around each other without arguing.
Those crazy kids. Actually, so here's, to be honest, Egwene is not one of my favorite characters.
Okay.
Especially here in the beginning, she has an attitude that I just can't get over. And she'll get better later on in the series, especially in the later books. But in these first few books especially, I mean, she's bossy, she's a know-it-all, she assumes that she's always right, and she's really petty.
Yeah.
And she acts as if she has a certain amount of authority over people that she really has no right to. Like here in this specific example, she's telling, we see that she's the apprentice wisdom, but yet she's acting as if she is the wisdom, and she's kind of calling the boys out and down when she just had her hair braided yesterday, literally.
Right, she's still just a girl in the village.
Right, but yet she's acting as if she has this place of power, and she's kind of lording it over the boys. So like, she's just really frustrating to me, and I don't know, she's terrible at times, and especially in the very beginning. And she speaks out of her privilege. That's the big thing. I think she speaks out of her privilege and not necessarily out of any right that she has over people.
Yeah, and like, absolutely, privilege is the key word. Because you may not think about Egwene's privilege because she does come from such a small backwater town. Like, the Two Rivers is nothing in comparison to the rest of the world. But in this tiny little town, she's the mayor's daughter.
Yeah.
You know? And now she's training to be an apprentice wisdom. And the wisdom of the Two Rivers, or of Emond's Field, has basically the same amount of power as the mayor.
Just in the women's
she's
circle.
going from a very elite position and then entering into another elite position. So she expects to be obeyed, or at the very least not challenged.
Right.
And so much of her attitude and her actions are coming out of that privilege.
Yeah. So do you think, I go back and forth on this. Do you think that this is just because, Robert Jordan intended the girls to be difficult, or is this like, could it be something else?
I'm not sure. Because, okay, so in the early books, like the first two books, I don't think Robert Jordan is very good at writing young women. Now, I don't know if it's because he's just not good at it, or if he did it on purpose. Because if you look at The Eye of the World especially, the entire book pretty much is from Rand's perspective. It's Rand's point of view. And Rand is a young man who doesn't have a lot of experience with women. So they could be these extreme caricatures of like stereotypes of young women just because it's coming from Rand's perspective.
That's a good point.
I mean, at the same time, Robert Jordan was an older Southern gentleman, and in general, society has taken young women and put them in such a place. Like, we think of them as fangirls, and we think of them as shrill, and we think of them as silly. Like, people people who are constantly at shopping malls or talking on the phone and obsessed with these inane things. And we've put them in this position to just be dismissed. You don't have to value their opinion. You don't have to value anything they do or say because they're just silly young women. And even if, Robert Jordan didn't believe that, he seems like a really nice guy who's positive on women in general. So he probably didn't, admittedly believe that. But we as a society have put that message out so much that he could have
just absorbed it
in his unconscious self. So I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I do agree, the first couple books, his writing of young women is not great. It gets so much better later on. It does. Once the girls do go out adventuring and they get more experience, they become more mature.
And I think that's the key there is the maturity. Absolutely. As the girls get closer to acting like adults, he does a much better writing them as women as opposed to young girls.
Yeah. Yeah. So just a little note to the listeners, our air conditioner just kicked on. I don't know if you can hear it, but it is triple digits in Southern California this week. So we're not turning it any higher than it currently is. So I apologize if that bothers you, but sorry.
Yep, that's just what it is. So we were talking before. You had mentioned that you noticed something this time around that you hadn't noticed before.
Oh, yeah. So when Egwene is talking about studying with Nynaeve, she says, Nynaeve has been teaching me, She says that I have a talent, that I can learn to listen to the wind. Nynaeve says not all wisdoms can, even if they say they do. So, all right, to me, that sounds like Nynaeve is recognizing the spark in Egwene, even though, of course, she has no idea what the spark is and she doesn't know what she's doing. But I really think that's what's happening here is that Nynaeve is like, hey, you've got a thing, and I have this thing.
We have a thing together.
Now we know that thing is the ability to channel.
Right. We know in hindsight, but yeah.
Yeah, you think?
I'm on board. I think so.
All right, so Egwene and Rand. We should talk about this part.
Yes, yeah, we should totally talk about Egwene and Rand.
So Egwene talks to Rand about not necessarily wanting to marry, but instead go off adventuring outside of the Two Rivers, which Rand dismisses out of hand as foolishness because of the patriarchy. All right.
So I just want to take 1 second to kind of step in on Rand's behalf as having been the idiot boy who got raised in a small town. I mean, that's what we were all told is you go to school, you get graduated, you find a girl, you get married, and the girls go to school, they get married, and yeah, so it's a small town thing. I mean, I've learned much more since I've left that small town, but yeah.
It is, but at the same time, he's just being a stupid boy, and I don't want to talk about him.
Absolutely.
But I want to give Egwene props for standing up for herself and not giving in to the pressure to marry and have children, even if she doesn't want to. Especially, like you were saying, in this small town where it would be expected without question to settle down and have a family like everyone else. Egwene is ambitious and stubborn, and she is not the kind of girl to accept the status quo just because everyone else is doing it.
Yeah.
That's a central part of her character.
That's really important later on.
Oh, absolutely. And this is the first chance that we have to see it. I agree with you that I have problems with Egwene. She is not one of my favorite characters either. But I just want to say good job for knowing herself enough to realize that she would languish and die if she stayed in the Two Rivers.
Yeah. So that's, as I guess that kind of ends all of our notes that we have on chapter 3. So we have the Gleeman comes in and kind of interrupts Egwene and Rand as they're about to launch into full-blown fight. And that is the chapter.
Yay.
And next, we have a word from our sponsor.
This episode of the Wheel of Time Pod-Thru is brought to you by the Beltane Festival. Beltane, the festival of spring. See unmarried women dance the spring pole. We have huge bonfires constructed in the center of town, almost as big as a house. Come celebrate spring's arrival at Beltane, because really, who couldn't use a holiday to break up the doldrums of sheep herding?
So that brings us to chapter 4, which is titled The Gleeman, and the icon is Tom's harp.
All right.
So I had to give the summary on the last chapter. Would you be willing to do the next one?
Yes, I shall summarize. Okay. 60 seconds on the clock.
And
Just
go.
kidding. No. The Gleeman, Tom Maryland, stomps out of the inn, very put out by the way he's been treated since arriving in Emmons Field. Rand and the others are all a little starstruck by him, but Rand manages to explain about the news Pat and Fane brought and the council meeting because of it. Tom dismisses it as old news and tells Egwene that she's very pretty and recruits her to be his assistant, and the boys start pestering him for news. He starts teasing them for being country bumpkins, essentially, until Egwene calls him out and he apologizes. Tom starts doing his Gleeman thing. He starts juggling, and everyone calls out requests for favorite stories. Tom breaks off abruptly when he sees Moraine, and this is our first glimpse of the game of houses at play. They verbally spar for a moment, sniffing at each other like cats and doing their thing. Then she glides off. He does not appear to take her explanation of why she's in the village at face value. The council reemerges from the inn, and Tom ducks back inside. Nynaeve argues with Bran and storms off, and Senbui continues to prove that he is, in fact, an old fool.
Yep.
Tam tells the boys that the council is going to set up a watch, and the boys are all eager to join in. He announces to Rand's surprise that he and Rand are going back to their farm tonight rather than staying in town for winter night. Rand, Matt, and Perrin debate whether to tell anyone else about the black-cloaked rider and finally decide that no one would believe them anyway. On the journey back to the farm, Rand asks Tam why the council took Fane away to question him, and that the mayor scared the people half out of their wits, and Tam drops some knowledge. Then Tam asks Rand if anyone else has seen the Black Rider. He explains that the council talked about it because several boys have seen him. Fine, upstanding boys, meaning not Matt. Rand wants to run back to the village to tell Matt and Perrin, but Tam stops him. He is cautiously concerned, but the chapter ends with Rand feeling bolstered, that people believe him, and that there is nothing that the Emmonsfielders can't handle together.
Wow, that was a lot to summarize.
It was.
Well done. Well done. Okay. So the first interesting thing about this chapter, I think, is that Rand notices right away that Tom has blue eyes, and he's fascinated by it.
Oh, yeah.
Because Rand has been teased endlessly his whole life about his eyes not being dark like the rest of the Two Rivers people. It's like this is our first real indication that there's something about Rand that doesn't fit the normal Two Rivers look here.
Okay, so I don't want to cry the patriarchy twice in one episode. And I
But-
promise I will do my best not to in the future.
Okay.
But we do need to talk about it one more time.
I agree.
So Tom, he's complaining about how the Emmonsfielders have thus far been treating a Gleeman, and then he describes Nynaeve as a girl child. When Rand tells him that she's the wisdom, he says, that pretty little slip of a girl should be better flirting with the young men than foretelling the weather and curing the sick.
Ooh, Tom.
All right, so I like Tom a lot. He's a very entertaining character to read about.
Oh, yeah.
But he's also one of the most gender-centric and patronizing characters in the book. He always has a gender-specific adage or a bit of wisdom to offer, mostly at a woman's expense.
Yeah.
I don't want to call Tom a misogynist or anything like that because that is going way too far. But he does tend to fall into the good old boy perspective way more than I'd like in regards to stereotypical gender roles, which is really a shame because, like I said, I really like Tom's character.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
He's funny and he's charming, and I really do like him. I wish I was able to read about him with less eye rolling.
Yeah, that's true. So Tom recognizes Pat and Fane's name as the boys are talking about why he got carried away, and he has this little quote. He says, "Fane was always one to carry bad news quickly, and the worse the faster. There's more Raven in him than man." So again, we're getting more indication here that Fane is a baddie, though.
Yeah.
Egwene comes here and defends him, saying that when he comes to Edenfield, he has more good news than bad more often than not. So I guess at this point, Jordan's just trying to keep us on our toes and guessing, is it Fane or Tom that we shouldn't trust?
It's Fane. Don't trust Fane.
Yeah, don't trust Fane. Never trust Fane.
So, going back to what I was talking about earlier when I mentioned the difference between Fane and Tom and their attitudes. So we see both of them think very highly of themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Both of them want to be the center of attention, like they're waiting for the crowd to gather. And both of them feel some derision for the Two Rivers folk. But the difference is that, so Fane has like a mean spirit about it. You know, he thinks he's better than. Whereas Tom is just teasing. And when he realizes that he's made them all feel foolish, he apologizes and he's truly contrite about it. So again, Fane bad, Tom good.
Right. And I like this brief interaction here between Tom and Moraine.
Yes.
We don't exactly know it here, but Tom and Moraine are master players of the House of Games.
Yeah, that Desdemar. And it's so funny because she knows exactly who Tom is. And he knows that she's Aes Sedai at least, if not knowing exactly who she is. So it's hilarious watching them like sniff each other like cats and kind of vaguely threaten. Well, I mean, Tom doesn't threaten Moraine, but Moraine vaguely threatens Tom.
Very, very, very faintly.
So it's a good scene.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I said the House of Games is Game of Houses because, again, I'm dyslexic. Sorry about that. But yeah.
I also like the part where Tam tells the boys that far-off wars don't interest him. And then we get this great line to show just how much Robert Jordan loves irony. Battles interest me, Matt said, which is, of course, hilarious when you look at the rest of the story.
Right. What would Matt want to do? Matt in battles? What? Huh? Yeah. Oh, the folly of youth. And of course, we see again this trend that the three boys will continue to have that bites them again and again and again in the ass, that they don't tell people things that they should.
Yeah.
So much in these first few books especially would have been so much better and gone so much smoother if they had just told Moraine things that were important.
Seriously. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the final thing that I have to talk about is that there's this really cool passage at the end of the chapter where Tam is talking to Rand and explaining why the council took Fane away, even though it scared the villagers. I love what he has to say, so I'm going to read some of this as kind of like an abridged version.
Okay. Go for it.
People don't always think or behave the way you might believe they would. Those folks back there. Let the hail beat their crops into mud, and the wind take off every roof in the district, and the wolves kill half their livestock, and they'll roll up their sleeves and start from scratch. They'll grumble, but they won't waste any time with it. But you give them just the thought of Aes Sedai and a false dragon in Gildan, and soon enough they'll start thinking that Gildan's not that far off. By tomorrow morning, half the village would be sure the entire world is about to descend on us. It would take weeks to undo, and a fine bell time that would make. So Bran gave them the idea before they could get it for themselves. They've seen the council take the problem under consideration, and by now they'll be hearing what we decided. They chose us for the village council because they trust we can reason things out in the best way for everybody. They will hear there isn't anything to worry about, and they'll believe it. It's not that they couldn't reach the same conclusion or would not eventually, but this way we won't have festival ruined, and nobody has to spend weeks worrying about something that isn't likely to happen. To which Rand thinks to himself that apparently being on the council was more complicated than he believed.
Can we please have more Tamil Thors in the world?
Oh my God, yes. Tamil Thor for president.
Seriously. Tamil Thor and Abel Cawthon. I'll vote for them.
Tamil Thor and Elsbeth Lewin.
You know what? Yeah, Elsbeth Lewin. Absolutely. I think it's really sweet how this chapter kind of ends because we get this like bit of knowledge drop from Tam, and then we get Rand who's feeling really enthusiastic, and he has this optimistic outlook that nothing that happens to the Edmund Fillers, there's nothing that they can't handle as long as they stick together. Which is really, really funny because this is the last time. Well, it's not really funny. It's actually kind of sad. This is the last time Rand is going to see his village the way that he remembers it growing up.
Yeah.
Because the next time he's back in the village,
shit has hit the fan.
Everything has gone wrong. Things have been destroyed. I mean, it's like it's going to be very, very different from this moment on.
Yeah, and it's like this line is kind of a farewell to innocence.
Yeah,
you know?
Very much so.
Like, it's so sweet and so optimistic, and then things are just going to get crazy. Literally crazy. Yeah. And, I mean, but the ironic part is that it's kind of true. Because if you look forward to, like, the Battle of the Two Rivers, like when Perrin comes back and they're just being attacked by hordes and hordes of dark forces. I mean, they do. They band together, and it's like the women have battle helmets and protecting the children and all the men. It's like unbelievable odds, but they do kind of band together and are able to accomplish anything. So it's not that Rand is wrong here. It's just that optimism and that sweetness.
Right before
this is the last time that we have that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that
Good point. Yeah.
I've thought that was an interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And that ends chapters 3 and 4 of The Eye of the World.
Already?
Yeah, what? In next week's episode, we'll cover chapters 5 and 6, where we finally get around to some actual plot.
Plot?
Yay!
Wow.
And wow, did that go from 0 to 60 in a snap.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Wheel of Time Pod-Thru.
We'll see you again next week. Make sure that you rate us and subscribe to us on iTunes or wherever you pick up your podcasts. Maybe leave us a positive review. It really helps us out. You can tweet us at WhatPodThru or email us at whatpodthru@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on anything we talked about today.
That's WOTPODTHRU@gmail.com. Thanks, everybody, and we hope the wheel weaves you in our direction again soon.